All right, everyone, welcome back to our Midnight Musings channel. I am your host, Lord Cephas. Tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to interview Broken Ansible. He joined us on our Midnight Magic Musings Mothership, our flagship show, when we talked about video game adaptations into movies. And tonight we're going to take the opportunity to get a little bit more insight about our friend here on the channel. Broken Ansible, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. Glad to be back.
Well, it's good to have you back. We had a great time recording that night. So we thought we'd give the fans and listeners just a little bit more information about you. So give us a bit of an idea. What were some of your earliest influences in science fiction, anime, fantasy?
Star Wars. Star Wars was everything as a kid. I was born in 1978. One of my first memories was Star Wars. I probably saw it with every family member in the movie theaters. Um, I missed Empire Strikes Back, but Return of the Jedi was right there. I must have saw it 4 or 5 times in a movie theater as a kid. I probably fell asleep on it just as many times as I actually watched it, but that's just being a kid. Um, but R2D2 was my hero. Uh, he's was the greatest of all time. Now, with the later stuff, he's definitely come down a bit. But yeah, Star Wars is probably my most favorite IP of all time. But of course, Transformers and GI Joes, like every kid in America and maybe in Britain. Yeah, those two shows are very influential. I was a latchkey kid, so those shows kept me in check. Of course, the Ninja Turtles on Saturday morning was also pretty big, and not having cable as a kid most of the time, when we got sneak previews of like the Disney Channel back in the day, it meant a lot. So getting to watch Tailspin and stuff like that was absolutely huge. So those are just a few key defining IPs that kind of influenced me as a child. So, yeah.
So you mentioned not having cable as a kid. So Broken Ansible and I are old enough to remember when the Disney Channel was a separate line item on a cable bill, and it was pretty expensive,
Yep.
considering back in the day it was like 20 something bucks, if I remember correctly, 25 bucks. One of the things you mentioned, and I kind of want to take this in pieces if you don't mind, you mentioned R2D2 being your most favorite character. And you said something about, in the most recent iterations, maybe he's been taken down a notch. Do you think that the only way to really introduce the newer droid characters is to do that? Do you think that's the mindset behind that type of writing or scripting?
Only for hack writers and hack script writers. So R2D2. So let's take a step back for a minute. So the reason why R2D2 has fallen in favor is not just Star Wars. It's me a little bit. As you grow older, you fill in, right? So a lot of characters that I didn't understand as a kid have come to the forefront. Like Luke's hero's journey. Luke was not my favorite character in Star Wars. It was R2D2, probably Chewbacca, maybe even C3PO. But as you grow older, you start to understand, what Luke was kind of struggling with, some of the profound moments in that writing, because there were nuggets of other titles in this. You had the Seven Samurai, you had all the different influential titles for Lucas. Plus, Lucas didn't write them. Um, he had other talent doing that, and he was kind of the architect of everything. So I think that I got a little bit older, and R2 kind of went back into the pack a little bit. And I love all the droids. So it isn't just R2D2. He's the iconic, the iconoclast, if you will, of the droids. Where he started to really slip, it was gradual as I grew up. But when he starts to slip off, they kind of made him into a joke. The whole thing, flying up and shooting oil out of his, legs and whatnot. I just thought that was kind of hack writing. Um, those moments took away from. So I don't hate the prequels, but I think there's a lot of missed opportunities in the prequels where they focused on certain scenes that could completely have been written out, chopped completely, and replaced with more substance. Because he obviously had writers, because the Clone Wars, anime show, and even the webtoons that were available, those were very good, stories. And I just think that they focus too much on some funny moments. The whole Jar Jar thing was awkward. I don't hate Jar Jar, but I do think his portrayal on the scene in the movie scenes are awkward until you get to the third movie. So he was used more of kind of like comic relief. At least he was still like in like episode 1, he was still like very much a driver of the plot, right? But I think maybe episode 2, kind of made him drop off a little bit. And episode 3, they brought him back a little bit. In the Clone Wars, he's a boss. I love R2 in the Clone Wars, but I think the movies really did him, the prequels, I should say, did him an injustice. And other characters just stood up.
So let me delve a little bit deeper into that. Do you think it's because of the age when you saw the prequels versus the age when you first saw R2 on screen?
No, there's cheese in the original movie. So I'm not, and I love cheesy. I mean, I love Spaceballs. I think that's one of the most. That's a top 10. So I think that it's really just how they handled it and how they portrayed. I mean, C-3PO in the prequels is just, why is he even there? So I think R2 was used in some moments to convey an idea of comic relief. It just didn't work for me.
Now, you mentioned the prequels. Did you have any specific character that jumped out at you then in the way that maybe it did during episodes 4, 5, and 6?
I think Anakin Skywalker, even portrayed in the awkward moments by Hayden Christensen, is the best live-action character that they've ever done. I think Hayden Christensen is that he is the epitome of Star Wars for me. I think he does a very good job. Now, Episode 2 is just not a good film, but there are moments in it where I really love that character. I really like his acting. I thought him in Revenge of the Sith was absolutely spectacular. And then the character, when they took that character, the likeness and even the voice likeness in the Clone Wars, I still see Hayden Christensen as that person when I'm watching the cartoons. And I do believe that the Clone Wars is some of the best Star Wars that has ever been written in canon. So, yeah, I think that character really stands out. Also, Ahsoka is my favorite character now. Just an amazing character all around. So,
Well, really, if you think about it, you have episode 1, episode 2. The Clone Wars lasted, what, 7 seasons, I believe?
I believe with what they came back with a couple of years ago, and then the Bad Batch.
So literally, you're talking about 9 potential opportunities to tell that complete story. It certainly fleshes out a lot more, excuse me, than just watching the 3 prequels in order. I think there's more richness and texture to the story to what you're saying, which we didn't get that in episodes 4, 5, and 6. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the best I remember is in the early to mid 80s, there was the Droids and Ewok Hour on ABC, and the droids weren't even property of Luke. They were property of someone else. We had a run-in there from Lola the Love Bunny trying to let us know that someone was here. But we were talking about, there was a little bit of filler in the mid 80s, but really didn't get anything until, the Timothy Zahn series in 91, 92. We had Heir to the Empire, that trilogy of books came out. It does kind of seem that the prequels have gotten a little bit better treatment than maybe the original three movies did as far as expanding the universe. Now, of course, you say expanded universe, that leads me into my next thing. You are a big proponent, an avid reader and follower of what was former canon. Is that correct?
I have certainly have read my fair share of what do they call them, the legends now.
Right.
And when I say read, I do mean Audible, because I'm not. Those books are really big. Now I do own the physical books. I'm not. My eyes are given way to the audio. But I will like to, pull it back a little bit. I love the Ewok movies. Caravan of Courage was a great film. I watched it a lot. I've probably seen that movie as many times as I've seen like Return of the Jedi. So, and there is some dark storytelling in that. They weren't, all fun and games. They're little kids and puppets and Muppets. Little people in costume. So there are definitely some cheese to it, but I loved them. I fell in love with them as a kid when they would come on ABC on Sunday nights or Saturday nights as they came on later as they got older. I can remember them on Betamax. So I went to a private school at a church, and they had a auditorium, and they would haul in this really sweet media rack with a brand new TV and VCR. They rented some movies, and they're like, "Hey kids, we're gonna watch Ewoks." And then they found out that they had Betamax, and that was a VHS. So one of the the goofs of that, one of the first goof ups by an adult that I remember is Betamax. Caravan of Courage, or maybe it was the original. Yeah, I think it was. That's the original, right? Yeah, so that's one of my kind of like good, funny moments in Star Wars history with myself. But I really enjoyed those movies. Wicket was one of my second best characters. Growing up, it was R2 and Wicket, and you see this in the movie. So and when I would get my grandma would buy me coloring books for Return of the Jedi, from the dollar store once they were like just pushing them out on sale, because I grew up poor. So I actually would get those coloring books, and they would really focus in on the front cover, color in R2D2 and Wicked. So.
Well, you took some of my thunder because I was going to ask you where you came down on the Ewoks, but now we know you're a big supporter of said Ewoks. You're not offended by them as maybe potentially half of the fan base is. They seem divided on this.
Can you call yourself a fan if you don't like the Ewoks? I'm not sure you can. They are like half of Return of the Jedi. They did help stop the Empire. I do honestly think that one of the Ewoks from a rogue village should have been a Sith and have little lightsaber scythes in one of the books, Heir to the Empire, or maybe even a actual straight up episode 9 where there is a Sith Lord Ewok. I would be a proponent of that. I love the Ewoks. I don't care if anybody else does.
The look of pleasure and satisfaction on your face as you just flawlessly share that with everyone is fantastic. I'm also a fan of the Ewoks. I grew up, but it may be a situation of how old were you when you saw it. I was 6 at the time, so I was in that perfect age for that. George Lucas has always said the movies were for children, and yet if you go back and look at a lot of the material they covered, there were certainly things kids could resonate with, but there was a lot of darker stuff, especially when you get into the prequels. But I think people forget it had to go that way to get to where we saw at the very beginning of Episode 4, and I'm discounting the fact that we even saw Rogue One and saw how it really started. But I think one of the interesting things, I'd love to get your comment on this, is we didn't get everything. We got 3 movies. Then you got a few books. Then all of a sudden the prequels are coming out. And then you have an entire generation of kids that never saw this. Do you think if we had been living in today's time and they had dropped movie drop them in trilogies. Do you think you would see the same fan response and devotion that you see dating back 40 plus years ago?
Before I answer that, I'd just like to point out that Return of the Jedi actually saved my life. I was at that school that I was just talking about, and I was playing with a little army tank, and they were redoing the driveway at the church. And the pastor's son and one of his friends, they were a bunch of, no good dudes. They were always raising Cain and whatnot, and they were throwing rocks at each other. And I was on top of this hill where they were throwing rocks across it, and I was just playing with my army truck on recess, and one of them hit me in the back of the head. And I still have the scar; it's very deep to this day. And I had to, they had to keep me awake. I had a concussion. I was bleeding profusely from the back of my head. And I was 5 years old. This was 1984. But Return of the Jedi was in the movie theater. So, as my mom was rushing to grab me, to take me to the doctors, I was blacking out. They had to sew up the back of my head, and the doctor told my mom, he cannot fall asleep. He may die. It's a very deep wound. They had that. So she took me to Burger King, or maybe it was Burger King. Got me a Whopper or something. Then took me to see Return of the Jedi. And the Ewoks kept me awake, kept me engaged. So, to get back to your question, what about today? Do kids even sit around for 5 minutes or without begging for a phone or a tablet? Do the IPs resonate with children today when they have a glut of them everywhere? Our kids are polymath and polyglot. I mean, they have everything under the sun. They can be fans of everything, and when you're a fan of everything, can you really be a fan? Fanatic about something? I don't think so. Something may stick with them, and they may get into some sort of feedback loop like we did with Star Wars, and that's certainly great when they do find that. But there's so much more on the table. We didn't have much. Star Wars was a genius IP. It had appeal to everybody. I mean, Empire Strikes Back is the best movie of all time, in my opinion, of all time. Nothing touches it. Nothing, it is the picture where, man is reaching up and touching God's hand. It is God's hand. Every other movie is just trying to reach it, just to touch it, just to, tug on its cape. It's a great movie, even if it's in the middle of two other movies. I'm not sure if there's another film that can go through the pacing. I mean, you'd have to start digging into the Godfather movies, or even going back into the oldies to really get a movie that can fight it in terms of what it does for films. So it has that for just the person who loves films, and then it has the kid aspect. It has the hero's journey, the spaghetti western of the first one, the hokiness of it, all you need to do is try and believe. It's got that almost Iliad feel to it. It's got this this Homer story, and then you have Return of the Jedi, which is kind of like, whoa, this is what people have been waiting for. This is the crescendo, and next thing you know, they have like Muppets in it. From the very beginning, the very start of that movie, they dive you into the puppetry that you got in the very first movie. You didn't get too much of that except for Yoda, right?
Right.
So in the second film, I just feel that they kind of brought it back a little bit. Let's flesh out the world a little bit more. It had wide spaces, wide fade-ins, wide fade-outs that kind of trained your eye. So as a kid, man, it was in a moment.
It's interesting you talk about that. If you think back to Empire, I did not see it in theaters.
Neither did
I saw it at home. I would see Return of the Jedi. In fact, that's the oldest memory I have of going to a movie theater. That may have been my first actual movie theater experience, looking back. But you have to remember, for our younger listeners, there was a time you didn't end a movie on a cliffhanger. You didn't. You had a definitive end. For example, The Godfather 2, there's a definitive end when there's someone on a boat who gets sent on to the next life. And that literally is the end of that story. The Godfather 3 picks up, has nothing to do with that. They've aged the story several years. This was unheard of. Now, this is pre-internet, so you could do something like this, whip the fan base into a frenzy, but there would be no knowledge for 2 to 3 years when Return would come out. And so it's a huge risk. It paid off massively because you had Lawrence Kasdan, who was just a massive influence in that movie. This is just my opinion. I think George Lucas is at his best when he's kind of CEO in it, and you have the people doing what they do. You know, if you're coaching the offensive line, go coach the offensive line. Don't come over here and try to help us on special teams. We need you where you fit. And I think that is some of the strength of those movies. And I think even the prequels, to a degree, have some of that as well. The other thing you were talking about with Empire and even Star Wars is the wide shots. George Lucas didn't come up with the idea. He just took some of the best ideas that had been seen in film and put them on a massive scale. He didn't create a ton of lore. He just took spaghetti westerns, different types of things. We've seen that with The Mandalorian now, where they would allude to those kind of things. They're throwbacks to Star Wars, but it's a throwback to a prior age. So he took this and really put it on the big screen and just kind of put it in everyone's face. I don't mean that being smart aleck. You know, now, you know, we were joking before we started recording about some of the Harry Potter movies, and I said, yeah, one of them they used the Time Stone, which is, of course, a Marvel reference to Infinity War and Endgame. But really, people hadn't seen all of that in that kind of spectacle before. Do you think that's why it really touched you as a child, because of the massiveness of it? What were some of the intrinsical values that you think really spoke to you?
Well, it set my imagination. I mean, that's you, and it could work in tight spaces. It can work in wide spaces. I mean, half of Empire Strikes Back is, you know, them in ice corridors or inside the belly of the space marine. You know, they're in very tight quarters. I mean, one of the most iconic scenes in all of Star Wars ever, for the romance fans that were, you know, Team Leia and Team Han, you know, ship it.
Was that a thing back then?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, I'm just making sure I didn't miss something.
Just bringing it back to modern terms, right? They had a moment when, what is it, the power coupler that they're trying to do, and, you know, they end up, you know, they're hanging on a kiss, and, you know, C-3PO comes in and ruins it. That was a very tight, spaced shot. They used cameras, they used technology in those movies to not set the standard, but to set the way they could write their next check to make the next movie. Whereas, you know, when you get the sequels, they were writing the technology. I remember getting a Linux journal. Linux is, you know, an operating system that's for service-based with Windows. And Linux journal started coming out around the early 2000s, at least when I was going to Books A Million and buying them. And they did a cover of the Clone Wars. And LucasArts had, you know, was it Imagination Ranch or something? Like
Skywalker Ranch?
Yeah, Skywalker Ranch. They had a studio. But they had a studio building the tools that were using Linux, using all these different brand new 3D rendering techniques. They were bringing the technology forward. That's why when you look back on, you know, Star Wars in general, the prequels are kind of cheesy looking. Well, the first one, because they were using very small tools that they were building, and then they get Episode 2. You get the wide open shots with the troopers. They actually made one trooper, and then they cloned him a bunch of times.
I see what you did there,
right?
in the second movie, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was what Industrial Light and Magic was.
Industrial Light and Magic, there you go. Yeah. So they were building the tools that now they were using, building tools for My Studio, which is a 3D software, but they were building things on top of that. They were building their own renderers. they were doing stuff that was on the cutting edge. Matter of fact, John Campia, he sold a company. He worked at a company that was in that space, making the 3D modeling, render forms and stuff like that. So I believe that's what he said was his previous job before this movie. So there's a lot of headspace that was coming out of the Star Wars films that everybody would use later. So they were setting the standards later in life, but they were using the standards to kind of get a marketing juggernaut.
And, based on that, think about all the movies that they've influenced and worked on through the years. I mean,
Indiana Jones.
they literally set the standard. I mean, to this day, Star Wars, regardless of your feelings about its current state, yay or nay, and that's to you, but they still are influencing movies and blockbusters that we do today. And by the way, random fact on John Campia, at one time, training to be in the ministry. Yeah, at one time, before he switched over to the movie side. So, yeah. So, that kind of undergird, for lack of a better way, your fandom. I want to ask you one thing on this, because I don't think we ever talked about this. You said you weren't a big fan of Luke. Is it that the character, the way it was portrayed, just didn't resonate with you? As far as your imagination, what was the disconnect? And I'm not criticizing it at all, but you have some who are like, well, he was whiny. Well, I get that. Adolescents are whiny. Sometimes as an adult, I'm whiny too. But was there anything specific that kind of elevated R2 above that, since he was kind of the main, his hero's journey story?
R2-D2 was pulling strings.
Sure.
R2-D2 was he was the catalyst to the entire story arc. You could even say Princess Leia was the catalyst. And when she came to the screen in the very beginning, there's intrigue, right? Because you don't know who this person is. We're flushed into a space attack scene, but R2-D2 carries that initial candle, carries all the intrigue of Princess Leia through him. He takes the plot through him. He drags C-3PO. It's the catalyst to getting Luke and Obi-Wan to meet. The Force is using this droid, period, which they do kind of touch in the Clone Wars, like what is a sentient being? And we see a lot of droids being mistreated, and then you see a lot of droids like, even though I didn't like the Solo kind of like droid rebellion they had in that film, because it just was kind of creepy. But I was just like, at least they're tackling this in this movie, because we don't get to see a lot of it. There is some stuff in the Clone Wars at the very end of the original run, where they get their own story arcs, the droids do, and it's amazing. I love it. But I think just C-3PO or R2-D2, he's driving the story. He is the person to attach to as you're being took on this story. Luke is just another person in the car, in my opinion. He is no more important in that storyline as Han Solo or Chewbacca, or I would say that the Princess Leia and R2 are the two most motivating characters in that movie. And then you get something totally different in The Empire Strikes Back. So you kind of are kind of shaken, in your foundation, so to speak, because R2 was like baller, but he's kind of like pining over where's Luke when Luke doesn't come back from his checkup. So R2's he's got his. You see another aspect of him with the sensor scope. That became big in the toys, but it wasn't big in the movies. But it actually, what else could he be hiding, in there, And then you get the scene in Return of the Jedi where he's hiding the lightsaber.
Right, he fires it up.
Yeah, and he became like, he was the helper. This guy, this little robot is driving a lot of business in here. He's the one that adds a lot of interaction with Yoda. Yoda is, you come to love Yoda's initial, how he emerges onto the scene. That's R2-D2. R2-D2's like, dude, I don't like you. He's trying to fight Yoda. because he doesn't see what Yoda is. And he's just like, no, no. And so you get this selfish side of R2. They actually personify that droid really well. And when he comes into, episode 1, and you actually see partially some of his origin story,
Mhm.
where he actually came from. You could actually say that the Force has been driving circumstances all this time, and it's making a statement about these artificial life forms.
So I want to come back to R2 in a second, but when I was watching episode 1 the other night, had some family over, they had not seen Star Wars. And unfortunately, Kid Duba was one of them. We were trying to educate the young lad, but it's a work in progress. But I was watching the pod racing uh, scenes again. And that's what I was thinking is exactly what you said. This is all force driven. There's no way any of that should happen, and he didn't will it to happen. It would technically be, quote unquote, the will of the force. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked a little bit in the series. It really is the overarching driving force, no pun intended, of everything that takes place. R2 has become so popular in context of pop culture. He's his own meme. You see the one, here, see what drugs do to you, and it'll be a garbage can that's sort of in the shape. I mean, he'll be in our lexicon of pop culture forever.
He did, what is it, R5D4? Is it R5? He did that little red robot at the
Yes.
beginning. It's canon. He did that robot dirty. He sabotaged. He sabotaged the unit. That unit is actually in, I believe, the Mandalorian.
I'm going to tell Uncle Owen on you for starting stuff. Before I transition completely out of the prequels and out of the mid-trilogy, if you will, if you could go back and change one thing in the prequels, what would it be? And then I'm going to ask you the same thing for episodes 4, 5, and 6. One thing you could adjust out of the original prequel and out of episodes 4, 5, and 6. You get one thing.
So,
if you want to change anything,
yes,
you don't have to.
Episode 2 is not a great. It spends way too much time on the chase scene through the city,
Mm-hmm.
and not enough time developing the relationship of Padme gives her, I can't believe I'm with a stalker to him. And that just seems off. He has some stalker face going on there, and I don't think that Lucas was paying too much attention to. So what I've heard, and this is from people in the Star Wars verse that have taken upon themselves out, say that Lucas was more driven towards, I've hired you to do a job, you're a professional, do your job, instead of, he's not a director for, he's a director for, logistics, architecture, stuff like that, vision. But he is not an actor's director. And he did not help the actors at all. He probably sank Hayden Christensen's career in many ways, because episode 2 is just such a terrible film. Good moments in it, but they spend way too much time. So my thing would be to do something different than that stupid chase scene. That, you get the death of a shapeshifter, who cares? Why? Like, you could have had a nice big opening scene of them flying through the city or something like that at the very beginning. Give me the scope, give me the grandiose, the gravitas of the city, and then I don't need to see what's beneath that watch plate. I don't need to see what's down there. And I think that they use the cartoons to bootstrap that in to the canon. They didn't have to spend so much time. I mean, it's like 20 minutes. That's a lot of time to spend on something so worthless.
In the grand scheme.
And it doesn't do anything for the story. And in fact, takes away time that they could have had that could have been cashed in on that relationship. because I don't buy. It's one of those things where you have to understand Star Wars and suspend your belief on a make believe thing
Right.
to accept that they got married in that with that type of on-screen interaction. Episode 3 is completely different in terms of tone, and you believe their love. You believe that they're there for each other, and a lot of that is to do from a lot of the when you rewatch it, Clone Wars did a great job of covering their marriage. Episode 2, I'm just like, I don't believe that whole thing at the very end where she turns to him and says, she deeply loves him. I'm just like, where was it? I just don't believe this was a part of what you showed me on screen. What happened off screen to make me believe that you're in love with him? Because he's kind of crazy.
Well, he's a crazy teenager.
Yeah, I mean, he was
Basically.
like 17 or 18 in episode 2.
That's still crazy.
Yeah, I just didn't believe it, and that's what I would change.
Okay.
Just the editing, I think, was sloppy on episode 2 because there's a lot of good stuff in there. Yeah,
The last 45 minutes.
Well, yeah, I suppose. I think that they could have had the battle with the lightsabers at the end, with all the Jedi coming in to Geonosis. I thought that would have been a show. I didn't think it was. It didn't last as long as that chase scene.
You could have definitely balanced it out, and maybe added in some additional layers, like you're saying, to make it a more complete thought.
So they did in they tried to do that in Obi-Wan with baby Leia. They really layered that on thick a lot, and that's the type of stuff they needed in the movie. So yeah, those interactions, those like roll your eyes moments. That's fine. We want to see her kind of go up against his quirks, but he's got stalker eyes in episode 2. Like he's got a grin that you're just like, dude, she's a princess. She's out of your league, bro.
I mean, there's something to be said for sticking with it. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
he eventually won her somehow, some way.
Yeah, with being a whiny brat, and that's like he dumps his emotions onto the table, and I'm just like, so you're telling me this well-to-do end of her career, or end of her princess career, who is well on her way of becoming one of the most powerful senators in the universe, is deeply, madly in love after just seeing him for the first time in all these years. I kind of question that storytelling. I think that like I said, I think that there's some kind of storytelling going on there.
Do you think it was a time issue? Maybe they had more in the canon just because the editing didn't include some of that material that might have made it a little more clear?
From what I understand, he reached out to Steven Spielberg to do the prequels, and Steven Spielberg says, no, anybody would be crazy to do that. The only person that can do it is you. That was the worst advice he ever got. Second worst thing he ever did was sell to Disney, but
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he's not a big fan of the Disney version of Star Wars.
so, well, yes and no. I have read a lot of the canon books, or at least from that was, and I think one of my favorite books was Lost Stars.
Really?
Lost Stars is a young adult author, Claudia Gray, and she's done some really interesting young adult and mostly targeted to girls, teenage girls. But she was brought in to do a Star Wars book against the Wendig books.
Okay.
And the first Wendig book was atrocious. I mean, boring. Like, I did not care about it whatsoever. But at the same time, and that was done through the proper channels, the proper book, Lucas Books or whatever. And another company picked up publishing on Star Wars for Lost Stars. The Lost Stars has a direct tie-in to Episode 7. And this is a Romeo and Juliet concept. There is a there are two young people who are best friends and turn into more than that, and one eventually goes to the Empire, and one goes to the Rebels, and they tell the story of the first three films through a different perspective. One of them being a pilot for a TIE fighter for the Empire, who is sold on the Empire. Sold. She is Imperial through and through. Like, she truly believes that she's on the right side of history, which we know that she isn't. And there are terms to come to at the end of this book. And I thought that she, for one, when they interviewed her on the show on Collider, the Star Wars show that they had, she is a true fan. She said one of her dreams was to write Star Wars. I even thought that her idea for her non-Star Wars books was pretty interesting. It's like a very, very interesting thing. And some of the best Star Wars storytelling, she was a fan because she told Star Wars story like Rogue One, right? Mm-hmm. You see the prequel leading up to Episode 4, right. But she tells the whole original trilogy from a certain point of view, which was a deeper nod to Star Wars fans. So she nailed it, and then she did the Leia, the first Leia book, which was fantastic. They find out she's the daughter, and this sets up episode 7 and 8 as well. So Claudia Gray was actually ground level to. So she is the Timothy Zahn, in my opinion. Because Timothy Zahn is a great author, but even his books haven't gripped me in the new stuff as much. Like his Thrawn books are good, but they're good. But his Thrawn books from the Legends are 10 times better. Right. Whereas Claudia Gray comes in and just kind of slams some Star Wars legitimacy on the table and says drops the mic, and that's what I really think she did. The Tarkin book is great. It's a fantastic, actually. There's a Battlefront type book where they basically drop you into a war. You're fighting as rebels, so it's a tie into the video games, the Battlefront games. So it's got that Battlefield. If for anybody who plays Battlefield games on the computer or PlayStation, Xbox, it's got that type of grit, that type of action. That was really good. There's an actual scene that they ate, that Rogue One ate. So you see the Darth Vader scene in Rogue One, and everybody's like, shaking in their boots,
right?
On and off the screen. There's a scene in Hoth in that book that it's something Twilight. I wish I had written that down. I didn't know we were going to get this.
That's okay. No, we're doing it as it comes, man.
But it was probably 2012, 13 or 14 when this book came out. But it's truly fantastic. And the newer books I haven't spent as much time on. After that, I did finish one of the Wendick books, and I heard Life Day was a lot better. And I've bought the new Thrawn. I've listened to the Thrawn movie. Oh, and there was one where Darth Vader and the Emperor. It's a tie-in to what's that show? The one that was on Disney.
So Kenobi?
No, not Kenobi. In a cartoon.
Bad Batch?
No, the other one with Kanan.
Oh, Rebels.
Yeah, Rebels.
That's on the list to talk about.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So I don't know how I just like Rebels.
That's okay.
Because I got a lot to say on that.
I want you to.
So you have. I'm sorry, got a little giddy there.
It's okay.
There is a tie-in to the Clone Wars and to Rebels through a book where Darth Vader and the Emperor get dropped on a planet, and you see some stuff go down. You get a lot of understanding of what truly Palpatine's all about, how much he hates Vader, how much he's disappointed in Vader. You get where he's still like, oh crap, I gotta keep this dude around. Vader is a beast in this book. Actually, I can't remember the name of the book, but it came out right around Tarkin. And then there are the Rebels books. I did the Rebel prequel book. I liked it. It was good. It was nice and short and sweet. So that was a pretty interesting book. Did like the Thrawn book, the first Thrawn book at least. That's the one I listened to. And I think that might be it for the books. But Rebels.
Go ahead, take us in. I know you want to go there.
I love it. I love Rebels. I haven't come to terms with season 4's ending, whether I think it was good or bad. But I can tell you that that's the biggest out for any retconning that you want to take down. If you want to just erase this Disney Star Wars right down the toilet, probably where it deserves to be for the movies, I should say, the 7, 8, 9. They could retcon it, and I would actually keep what they did in 7, 8, 9 as canon. I would just retcon using a loophole,
Right.
so to speak. And I think all the fans want a loophole as well, or at least all the fans that were Star Wars fans before these original.
Like looking in the mirror, huh? Something like that. So I don't want you to leave Rebels just yet, because I know that is a big part of your fandom in more recent years. What do you think it was? It's a cartoon. Cartoons don't appeal to everybody. People like us dig it, but not everybody does. What did they tap into with Rebels that created such a dedicated fan base?
They're telling Luke's story without Luke. They're telling. I mean, it was like having a Luke and Obi-Wan type of story. You didn't know where it was going to take you. They went dark in a few places. They went kiddie. They went. If the medium is just like pedestrian Star Wars, they spent as much time below that median as they did above it. Kids, and I think they portrayed all the individual characters. They gave time to them. They allowed them to come into their own. Chopper is like R2D2 on with ADHD. It was really good, and there's a reason why he's that way, and there's a reason why he's so beloved by the crew. Zeb is the original Wookiee, so it was paying homage. I think that Dave Filoni had a good thing going, and it really didn't. It told you Star Wars without spitting in your face or trying to change it just to put your mark on it, so to speak. And I think Disney is doing that in some ways. So, they try and put the thing on Star Wars just so people know that, hey, by the way, this is ours. And I'm just like, well, no, this is everybody's. You just have to get funding. And we will watch it, we will read it, we will accept it if it's good. And they definitely allowed Rebels to at least be around for a while. And I'm kind of sad that they took it down because it was getting really interesting. They brought Thrawn in, which was like just amazing. I think the ending was very cool. I'm still waiting for something to happen.
And that's where I was hoping we would go. Yeah.
I think that Ezra, Thrawn, and gosh, what's her name?
So.
No, not Ahsoka. The Daisy Ridley's kid. I forgot it. I just tried to erase it.
I can only but shake my head at him right now.
From episode 7.
You mean Ray?
Ray, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's late at night, folks. It is Midnight Magic Musings channel, so we don't do this early in the day.
I think that Rey. I don't have a problem with Rey mostly. I just don't feel she earned it. She just had everything kind of. She went Super Saiyan 4 right off the bat. So I think that Finn and Rey and Ezra and Thrawn should absolutely reboot the entire thing, bring back the Youngzing Vong.
Interesting. Okay.
I would say that a future Finn who is a Jedi,
Okay.
who is Rey's like best friend, confidant, Padawan, her Padawan. I think that she needs to die in that film at the very beginning. Finn needs to find exactly what happened at the end of Rebels to give the loophole and take it, and come back and have maybe two, maybe even a whole trilogy of current Rey, future Finn, trying to fight the future. Because the Youngzing Vong are coming, and Thrawn knows about it, and as him and Ezra are going to have to make some sort of like coming home, come to Jesus moment.
Right.
Look, we need to fight these guys because nothing's going to beat them but technology. And there is an original idea in the legends where the Emperor was trying to create all these Star Destroyers because he knew the Youngzing Vong were coming.
Right.
And they cannot be touched by the Force. And these big, metal Death Stars don't need the Force. So you could say, in his own way, which would give him some sort of like depth of character, was trying to save the universe through Force. No pun intended.
No, I see what you did there. Okay.
And that was a fan theory for quite a while. There's books where there's expeditions in the Clone War time where even Obi-Wan and Anakin, get onto a ship that's going out there. There's stuff in the to see what's happened with some Jedi, and that some Jedi actually has had or may have had some interactions with these
Right.
people they're like before, So there was there's a big bad from the legends that they could completely bring back, and actually have the current actors and actresses to come in and give us one heck of a send off to the Disney canon and completely dial it back. The things that they've put into a book that came out recently with Luke, where Luke actually had some sort of shadow, transfer of himself. He actually has seen, the place where it's in episode 9 that he's taken. There's actually more lore to this.
Okay.
So there's more. They're trying to backfill a lot of things
Right.
into it. Unfortunately, I think that's the wrong way to handle things. I think what you need to have a complete thought in the movies and not have to backfill, and then add to what you've already done. You don't need to backfill. Just expand on what you've done. Don't come back and say, well, he was thinking like this in the movie, because if in this book they came out like 3 years later after they've done all the psychoanalysts and analysis of these decisions, they're like, okay, we got to make this make sense. We can just stop that. We can fix it. Use the characters like Finn. Finn can come back and help save the universe. And dare China to not have him front and center.
And again, not trying to spoil what he's talking about in Rebels, but it opens up a really different dimension, no pun intended, for what Star Wars storytelling can actually be. I mean, it's still science fiction. It's still fantasy.
Science fantasy, really.
Yeah, basically. So to close up Rebels, there have been rumors that you will see the crew appear in the Ahsoka series in live action.
I hope so.
Do you want it?
Absolutely. Ahsoka. I didn't dislike the Ahsoka they brought into. Um, she's a little bit more distant. Right? So the Ahsoka book. Oh, and I listened to the Ahsoka book. I liked it pretty much. Um, she's just a lovable character, and I like the actress. I think she's always been good in movies. She has a wide range, and I couldn't dislike. She acted pretty much how she acted in the Rebels. So I'm all in on that.
She had certainly aged from
Yep.
the Clone Wars, and so her demeanor obviously changed
Yep.
over time. All right, last two things, and I'll let you go on Star Wars. Where do you come down Shadows of the Empire? Fan?
The video game?
Video game, all of that.
I love it. So I was a big Jedi Academy player. The multiplayer mostly. I was in a group of, back then we called them plants. I think you only call them now for like those local games.
Right.
But we did an online group all over the United States. Matter of fact, a lot of my friends to this very day, people I call brother, I met online back in 2001, 2002, playing Star Wars games. One of my best buds, Steve, was my rival in that game, and we never saw eye to eye in that game because he was way better.
A begrudging respect, do I hear?
He was a cheater, even though he didn't cheat. He just used cheat moves, and we call him the Blue Tornado.
That sounds like a cheater to me.
But we played Jedi Outcast, and I never played the story modes in those games. I say I did. I didn't give them enough time because I was always just but the Shadows of the Empire on the Nintendo 64, I love it. I love the comics. I have some of the original Dark Empire comics from Dark Horse. Yeah, I love Star Wars in general. I love Mandalorian. I love the half of the Book of Boba Fett. I thought half of it was his show and the half was
Right.
2.5. Although I like everything I saw there, mostly anyway. The 3D effects were shot in places.
Yeah, and we've seen with Marvel as well, they've had some VFX issues with different companies and some, which probably explains some.
I'm actually would love to see a retrospective by Disney to see why. I mean, it's like Captain Marvel. There's one scene. Now, I didn't hate the movie, but there's one scene. I'm just like, you guys could have used a coloring book and conveyed that idea just as good because this 3D is garbage. That scene at the end. Have you seen that?
I have.
Where she's kind of like on that force field and she's trying to break through and it pans in. I'm just like, that is literally a CG person. There's no suspense of belief.
So I've got one more thing for you, and that is because you didn't answer one question, and I do want to get an answer from you. Episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Oh, what do I change?
What did you change? If anything. We're putting you in the director's chair. You're the writer. What would you, if anything, you can leave it the way it is. You see, we didn't rehearse these before we came on the air, so he's getting live fire here.
Let's see. What would I would say the thing that I always wanted more. I would just add more of it. I want more scenes with droids. I appreciated the technology in those movies. The droid. So on the Cloud City, you get C-3PO goes in and he gets shot and it kind of cuts away for drama effect. And then you have Chewbacca that goes in there later and there's droids on the wall.
Yes.
One of the things I love about the TV shows and some of the animated films is that they give you those panning film, the humdrum stuff, the everyday Star Wars that they don't think anybody cares about. We do. I would live and breathe in the Star Wars universe. I would work in Cloud City. I wouldn't put that thing in my head.
I was just going to ask.
That was
you
in
could be a
Rebels.
Lobot. So.
Yeah, well, that has there's episode of Rebels with that. It's not a very good thing to have. But I think that playing those video games I talked about. In our group we had a think he was 13 or 14 at the time. He lived out in Arizona and San Diego between his two, his family, and to his very friends to this very day. His kid's actually about to graduate from high school.
Oh, wow.
And he was a map man. So he would use so those were based on the original Doom 3 engines. So, there were a lot of tools to make your own maps. And this kid built a custom Jedi temple for us, for our group. He did an amazing job. And one of the things that, you would see during that time period of PC gaming is that a lot of these maps were made by fans, for fans. And you would see a lot of the episode 1, like the Duel of Fates, you'd see 10,000 maps for that because that set a lot of people's imagination on fire because those halls were so majestic. But there's a lot of stuff where we wanted to see, junkyards. We wanted to see droid shelves where droid parts and droids were running around. So, there's a video game that Knights of the Old Republic.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of fills that gap in. So BioWare did a really good job in filling that in. I think we're getting a remake of Part 1 and 2.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So Part 2 is one of the best half games of all time. So I think a fan's actually bringing all that back. So to live in those worlds, to show a little bit more, I think directors don't need to cut it. I think the movie theaters, let them die, let them go. We don't need them. So, and if you do, make it a niche thing, and then people will come. But however they need to make their money, let us have a little bit more than 15 seconds of spans. Those little glimpses, I don't think, as a kid, growing up in a time where we didn't get much, you had to watch the movie 10 times.
Right.
Kids aren't watching movies 10 times.
Yeah, the media consumption is just completely different than anything we experience.
So they need to give us more than glimpses. They need to give substance, which is why the TV shows work a lot because they you can binge watch them and you can have them play in the background, and then you can kind of see what you didn't see before in the heat of the moment when it was brand spanking new that day. So I think that the TV shows do fill in the gap a little bit, especially in Mandalorian when he goes to Tatooine and the junkyard lady.
Yep.
Yeah, her entire presence in that show kind of solidified that show for me. Like, I believe this took place in this world. So The Mandalorian did a really good job for the Star Wars films. So to say that Disney is completely competent for Star Wars, it's not fair. They have some books that are really good that they've paid for. They have some shows that are really good that they've paid for. I think it's the mainline Star Wars stuff that they just can't be trusted.
All right, someone put you on the spot. What ends up happening with the Darksaber, Mandalorian, season 3? Who ends up with it by the end of that season?
What do I want to happen?
I'll take both. What do you want?
There's
what do
three.
you think?
I have three things.
All right, walk us.
No, I have 3 things. 3 different outcomes.
Okay, go ahead.
Mando gets it because that's easy.
Yep.
And it's boring. 2, Grogu gets it because I need to see me some yodeling with a Darksaber.
That, I would like to see that, yeah.
3, Sabine as an older person who transitions the show into the show that we get, Ezra.
Do you think they'll ever do that outside of a book or a cartoon?
Yeah,
You think they will eventually?
I
address
think he's already said they are. There's going to be a cartoon. I think they're waiting for the right time to make it and to get the. They need to have all their ducks in a row of stories that they want to tell before they embark on such. Because that's going to be where Star Wars goes. Because that thing with the old Republic, High Republic thing, that's not going anywhere. Oh, we missed the show. The one where the kid has he's working as a pilot, and he goes and spies on that water world.
Oh,
I forgot the names. I'm such a terrible fan.
I know. Shame on you.
Resistance?
Is it
Yeah,
Resistance?
the
Star
one-
Wars Resistance?
Yeah, something like that. I thought that was great. You know, people said that was such a terrible show. Look, I don't like the First Republic, or the first
First Order?
the First Order. Yeah. I don't like
Freudian slip there.
Freudian slip there. I don't like them. I don't think they're interesting. I don't think it's an interesting place. But it is what it is. And I'm not going to knock good storytelling, or at least entertaining storytelling, just because it's attached to something
Right.
or something I don't. I think that they found a space of Star Wars where it comes back to what I just said. I would live in this world. I find there are more questions about how people live in this universe, and how people why are people stuck on planets when, what is the fuel cost? We hear this somewhat, in Rebels, man, we can't even pay for our fuel, blah, blah, blah. You get that, right? And you definitely get a little, in the season 2 of this show, you get a little Battlestar.
Right.
We need to get, we're moving. But I think that there's enough fun there, and enough, hey, I get to see people living in this world. And I think that there is some captivating storytelling, at least on the micro level. It's not all bad. It's just I can't trust them with putting things on the feature film. Look, I liked Rogue One. It did not need to exist. I liked Solo. Did not need to exist. These things just kind of, they're money makers for them, but, well, at least.
Well, 1 out of 2
Yeah,
ain't bad.
And I'm telling you, people who refuse to see Solo just because of, The Last Jedi, that's pretty petty. I understand it, but it's kind of petty. I thought Solo was a decent film. It was enjoyable. It was of all the things, it was a popcorn movie. And I'll take a Star Wars popcorn movie. It didn't do anything that really ticked me off. It didn't do, anything that made me roll my eyes or say, okay, well, there's a checkbox they had to fill. No, it truly was a decent. I thought it was okay. What did it make me want to? I wouldn't hang my hat on Fandom on it.
Right.
But it's certainly better than half the Marvel films.
So you said something earlier, and this doesn't have to just be Star Wars. This can be Marvel, Battlestar Galactica, can be any fandom. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But I'm going to try and say what you said. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said that the entertainment companies may own the IP, but they don't really own the IP. Explain a little bit about that, if you would. I think that's an interesting concept.
So, if we're truly talking legal, of course.
Sure.
But they sell a product, you buy it. But once that product is consumed, or once they've put forth an idea, we can take that. We can't go out into the market and create it for money.
Right.
But if you look at Star Wars, and there's several on YouTube from the fan movies, are better Star Wars than Disney could ever think to write. They're just better Star Wars. And for people who are on shoestring budgets of less than $2 million, they did a better job than Disney in some cases. Disney should be hiring those people. Those are people that will make Star Wars movies and make them sell off the thing. So their ideas, their concepts, their things are better, made me love Star Wars as much or more than Disney. Star Wars Theory, they may bring back Mace Windu because of I will put that out there. Star Wars Theory is one of the best YouTube channels for Star Wars, and his like the way he handles his business with the fandom, because he doesn't always like the fandom or the fandom menace or whatever name you want to give it.
Right.
But we have consumed these products. We have let them permeate into our, into our bank accounts, onto our, collector shelves, onto our DVD shelves, onto our, digital purchases, to our video games. We hold their stories in our heads rent free. They can never take those back from us, and we can always, at the very least, for as long as we want to spend our own money, we can put forth new ideas with those names and say a fan state.
Right.
What can they do? Nothing. And without us, they're nothing. So,
And you saw Next Generation utilize that stuff perfectly. There are several episodes that are considered to be some of their best. And we'll transition to Star Trek here in a minute. I want to ask you a couple questions on that. But it was fan fiction. It was they took spec scripts. At least up to a certain point, and then they're like, this is going to get us, we're going to be done with this. But there were some really good ones. What is the one?
people are fan scripts until they buy one. It's canon.
Yeah, what is the one with Professor Moriarty, TNG? When he gets
Oh,
on,
yeah.
when he leaves the ship, and it's basically the ship in the bottle.
Yep.
That was a fan fiction story. I mean, there's some several good ones that they reworked and made really, really good. One last thing on Star Wars, if I can. Do you see them going trilogy next when it comes to feature film, or do you think it's going to be standalone film until they kind of figure out? And part two of that is, will it be Favreau and Filoni
I hope so.
heading it? You think?
I hope so. I hope that every person that they've hit up for. So let me step back a minute. I don't care if another Star Wars movie ever comes. I am not going to sit here and preach that there has to be a Star Wars movie, because honestly, I haven't. Spider-Man, No Way Home, whatever the movie was.
Yeah.
Saw it with you in the movie theater. Yep. Last time I saw a movie in the movie theaters, and I think I saw Doctor Strange in the movie theater, and that was only because it was on a whim. Had no intention of doing it. I just said, I think I will. Those were the only two movies I've seen in 2 years. I couldn't care less. I have a 60-inch TV, and I could lay on my bed and put have a little grip and put an iPad in front of me, and it's a 60-inch TV, two inches from my face.
Right.
I don't think that the movie is necessary, or at least the movie on the big screen, because we have big screens in our houses, especially for people who have projectors.
Sure.
So, and that's probably where a lot of things are going to go in this brave new world we have. So we can just get rid of this and go to long form. I think they have a good recipe with the Star Wars television shows. I just think that if you look at wait till we get over this COVID thing before you start pushing stuff out, because Obi-Wan was half behind. It's not a complete thought. That they kind of they gave us a long plotting story in 7 episodes, 6 episodes.
6 episodes.
Yeah. 6. They took 3 of those episodes where I would think this would have been a 15-episode season, like a Walking Dead season.
Right.
And then there's only 3 more episodes. What are you doing? How much? That was a crazy movie. And I think that the product shows that it's just mediocre. There's some good stuff in there. There's some enjoyable stuff. I don't think as a show it's half-baked. Truly. They must have been high when they thought that would have been a good idea. And maybe it was time constraints. We'll never know, right? And nobody's going to.
Yeah, because it's been in the can for a while.
Yeah.
Before they actually released it.
But I think that it needed another 3 or 4 episodes. But with that being said, I think that they can do, if they put the money and effort into it, they could do movies on Disney Plus, or at least have movies that would come to Amazon or Microsoft Store or whatever,
Right.
Apple TV, where they could sell you a ticket. to the Star Wars, and maybe a season 2, where it's like hey, look, we're gonna give you, a binge worthy thing. I don't think waiting people week to week to week is a good thing. So I would go the Netflix route. We're gonna do it all in one shot. We're gonna make one whole movie or 3. We're gonna dice it up into into 1 season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, but you're gonna get it all at once, and you can binge it at your whim. And let's say it's 10 episodes, and you give me a movie in 10 episodes, not 40-minute bites.
Right. If it's 40 minutes,
If
depending
it's-
on the series.
Yeah, I think that there's enough transitions in the original Star Wars movies that, you could say, well, let's take that idea and let's give you like 4 or 5 transitions in one episode, and then you get 10 of those, and you have a movie. So I think that they could do something like that, and or have better ideas. But I don't think they need to go making movies anymore. I don't think anybody does these days.
We know they had a $1 billion month in July, which has been the norm, I think, since I saw the stat, which says 2013, July's been a $1 billion month, minus COVID, knock that out. But the next couple of months, there's not a whole lot coming out until you get into, I guess, November with Wakanda Forever, I guess will be the next big tentpole. And I think it will do well because there's going to be a lot of curiosity about who takes on the Black Panther mantle and how they work all that out.
Didn't the actress that plays his sister almost die in one of the stunts?
They did have someone severely injured.
That was the sister.
And so you're not really going to see, I don't think, Top Gun will probably still be playing. Top Gun Maverick will probably still be in theaters.
Still haven't seen it.
Still making money. Tom Cruise laughing all the way to the bank.
One of my
Well
favorite
done.
actors these days.
Oh, you know what? Well deserved. Well
Yeah.
deserved.
Him and all that's crazy.
But yeah, that's true. I don't know long term, really, theaters. I like them as a spectacle. I think that's kind of what they're for. You mentioned the popcorn flick. Ask my girls who think I'm extremely cheap rather than thrifty. We're not going buying $10 candy. It's just not our thing. Whereas like a pause it here, go to the restroom, do whatever I need to do.
Yep.
And the sodas are a whole lot cheaper because we buy the generic brand. So,
Yeah.
but
You can get Dollar Tree Twizzlers.
right on. Well, it's $1.25. There has been
Just buy
increase.
one bag of Twizzlers, 1 month, eat them all, keep the bag, put the knockoff Twizzlers in it, and then you can serve those to the.
It's also how you get around using powdered milk instead of gallons of milk too. But I digress. That's probably more information on the household.
Just never let them catch you.
That's exactly right, because then all of a sudden they have tummy aches and things like that. All right, well, today, unfortunately, we lost Nichelle Nichols, who was Lieutenant Uhura
Oh no.
on the original Star Trek, original series. I just want to ask you a little bit about Star Trek, because I know that you do
I'm a big Star Trek.
appreciate
I'm
it.
a big Star Trek.
Walk me through that one. Give me an idea of your Trek fan. Kind of balance out some of the Star Wars fan.
One of the curses of my brain is I can hold. And there are 2 competing ideas of massive, overarching. Actually, there's 3, but this book series that's better than both. Actually. Better than both Star Wars and but this Star Trek, it all started watching probably The Next Generation. I remember the day it came on. Now, I had seen the Star Trek movies, right? I had, do you remember that toy that was red in it? You put little films in it. It was like a little roto film.
Yeah,
thing.
the viewfinder.
The viewfinder, and you
Yes.
had scenes from movies.
Yes,
I had the Wrath of Khan. So I actually the Wrath of Khan through the viewfinder. I watched the original movies, kind of 8, 9-ish, even though it was 1980. And I had snuck into the living room when my uncle was watching HBO back in the day. So when I say I didn't have cable, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, my uncle, while he lived with us for a little bit, had a box.
Statute of limitation.
Yeah, Statute of Limitations. And I used to sneak and watch like scary movies and Star Trek. And then eventually, here in the town that we live in, the local, if we we had basic.
Yes,
Then.
that's
We
correct.
got 13 channels.
Yep.
But one of the channels, we would sometimes get like Showtime, sneak weekends,
Yep.
and HBO. So my mom would get the VCR and she would just start it at 7 a.m. and she would record it until, record them all in EP mode
Yep.
where you got 6 hours
Mhm.
or 8 hours and then put another video in. So I got to watch a few Star Trek movies that way. In my fandom of Star Trek started with the next generation. Say I watched the very first episode, and then we got into going back with movies because I did see on a field trip at the Boys Club, I believe, or maybe it was at the Boys Club. So they used to. I saw Howard the Duck. That's not something I would.
Oh, that's for my kids back in the day.
You
I don't
went-
know.
I think you went there at the same time.
I'm pretty sure I
possibly,
did, yeah.
1987-ish. Yeah. So they would roll out the movies sometime, and we watched quite a few movies, and I do believe we watched the Star Trek. But it would have been either the 1-5
Okay.
with his brother, Spock's brother.
Yes, I bought right.
Yeah, and then I watched a couple on ABC, Sunday night movies.
Sure.
Back in the day. That would have been the Search for Spock, and then also and of course I probably saw the Return Home like 1,000 times.
As you should.
Yeah, it was on TBS. Once we got TBS,
Yes.
they just played it every day for a while.
There be wells.
Yeah. So I was kind of a middling fan. Then the Next Generation comes out, and you're glued. I didn't watch every single one after a certain year because I got a job. I was
Had a
15.
life.
Yeah, I had a life, but I watched most of them all the way up until season 6, and then it was like spotty,
Okay.
and then I would have to watch them in reruns. I'll tell you a Star Trek story. So there was this guy who was dating one of my coworkers, and he was a big wrestling fan, and he was a huge Star Trek to the point of being obnoxious. Because one day we were talking, he was a smoker, so they would go out for smokes, and I would just kind of, I'd be bringing in the carts, at night. I would just, chat him up, and we would talk Star Trek, because another one of the managers actually liked Star Trek. So if the manager would talk, that means you can, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you got your get your breaks in when you can. When the manager's taking their breaks and they're chatting you up on Star Wars and wrestling or Star Trek and wrestling. So there's that one episode where Will Riker and I'm not sure if is that the episode that they go into a rock basically. Will Riker worked on the Pegasus.
It is Pegasus.
Yes.
That is a season 7 episode when
Yeah.
they bring back Admiral Pressman,
Yes.
who was his former commanding officer.
Yes. So this episode is where they find a illegal experiment of a starship that is fused into this asteroid because they had a cloaking device that would actually fuse, like you would fly through things.
That was a violation
A
of the
violation
accord.
of a certain accord.
Yes.
And that was one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek of all time. May still be. And I was telling them this, and this guy was incredulous. His name was Steve. Steve told me this did not exist. I have seen every single episode. This does not exist. I was laughing at him on this. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? I watched this episode.
Right.
So I did what you would expect. I went and bought the episode on VHS, and I walked it up to him and handed it to him. Talk about a person who kind of snubs you, right? And then you open their eyes to something. He never did that ever again to me. Matter of fact, appreciated me as a fan of Star. As an equal, I should say. When I just like slide that episode right over to him, he takes it home and he's just like, "Holy crap! I've never seen this episode." And he starts thinking, "Where was I?"
Right.
Because he thought he was there for every single one. Now, you know, he would eventually actually host all of the Monday Night Raws and
Okay.
TNT Nitros and
Cool.
everything at his house. He got the Dish Network and all that stuff, and I helped him install that. And he bought like a big screen 36-inch TV, and we would watch pay-per-views over there. So this kind, you know, he was in that, you know, 96 to 2000 era of, or I should say probably 97, 96 to 90
Okay.
era of, you know, me always going over to a friend's house and watching, you know, these things together. We watched Deep Space Nine and all that stuff. We'd get people over and watch them all together sometimes. So yeah, we shared the genres together. So that was a really kind of memory, you know, like a message in a bottle, so to speak,
Sure.
of Star Trek history for the next generation. But Deep Space Nine is what really set me apart. Like, you know what? Voyager's okay. Next Generation's okay. You know, I'm too old to sit there and say if I never watched another one again, I'd be okay. I would truly be okay. But there's something that is about Deep Space Nine. They nailed so many notes. That is, you know, Avery Brooks. I could listen to him. There's he did like a fish. There's like an underwater like nature thing where he did the narration.
Really?
And I watched it just to listen to his voice. This cat is one of the best actors who never really went off on, you know, the big screen, but he was doing theater. Like, he's a teacher for theater, so it's bringing up a generation of youth into acting and stuff out there in San Francisco. So this guy really just sold that to me. Every character I loved. Every character. I thought Jadzia Dax was that their race. They brought that in, and that was really interesting. Worf, when he landed in that show, it was just like, you are here, my brother. I love Worf. He's one of my favorite characters in The Next Generation. And now he's in Deep Space Nine, and they took his character in a different direction.
That's true.
And they made him kind of like I don't know, he's kind of like the glue, in my opinion. He is the backbone, whereas, you know, Odo is kind of like not backbone.
I see what you did there.
So
a changeling.
a
joke.
changeling. And I thought what they did with the Celestials in the wormhole,
Yeah.
they really never kind of go too far with it. I mean, they still haven't told us, and I honestly think there should be some sort. There's two things that really bother me in the Star Trek universe. It's because we've kind of hit a wall with where we're going in the future, right? There's no future in our Star Trek. It is pretty much, you want future, you take a video game, like the Voyager video game, or maybe the Deep Space Nine video games, but they'll tell you an extra story, but we're not, or get a book and read it, which I have. But I think that we've gotten a whole lot of let's backfill everything, every nook and cranny up until, you know, the original series.
Right.
I mean, we'll save that for later because there's certainly some stuff in there that I love. But there's so much missed opportunity, and I just think they probably have hacked writers. Now, I'm not saying this new Star Trek series is really good.
That's Strange New World.
Yeah, Strange New World is great. I love it. I love every episode. I love every single episode is a win for me. I hate the what's it even called? Discovery.
It started. Yeah. Started.
I hated it. They stole so many ideas from video games. First of all, the whole thing with the fungus, and there is a fungus PhD that actually gave him the idea.
Okay.
But there are parts of the story that is actually taken from a game from an indie developer, and they duked it out in court, and I think CBS won, of course, or Paramount. But the core idea was interesting, but they changed so much. They changed the way the Klingons look. And then they had to spend episodes backfilling it. I've already said what I hated about that. You have to spend time trying to tell me why you did what you did in the first place, and you just keep moving on. It's looking the same.
Well,
This is the
remember
second
trials
time.
and tribulations, right?
Yeah,
I don't want, Worf didn't want to talk about why
Yeah.
the change. It was simple. It's up to your imagination
Yep.
until they backfill it in with the book.
Yep.
Just let it be.
Just let it
That
be.
that works. You don't have to.
Yep.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, but in my opinion,
Yeah, it's just
waste valuable airtime.
they did, and everything looked too new, and it also looked like Mass Effect, a video game series that I love. So I was just like, oh, their suits are the Mass Effect suits. I'm like,
I mean, yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing? You're just and I didn't like Spock in that show,
Mm-hmm.
but I love the same Spock in
In Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds. So yeah, it's really weird. Strange New Worlds actually feels like Star Trek.
I've heard a lot of people say that.
It
Yeah,
feels
it's not-
like the original series, and it feels like something that can coexist with Enterprise, which I love.
I was hoping you'd say something about it because you
I-
have been to this point. You
I
haven't
love-
said anything.
I love Enterprise. I like Scott Bakula as an actor. I think that people give him way too much crap, and I'm trying to question how far they actually watched the show, because maybe in the first 2 seasons you could probably say, well, he's just there. He's a cardboard cutout for a captain.
Right.
But that was the story that they were kind of telling with this time thing, and when they got away from that, piece, and they started going into that quadrant of space that's got all the hiccups in it. I thought that he really dialed in, or they dialed in, and he acted
Right.
the crap out of it, where he was a legitimate presence. He was a tour de force. He did what needed to be done, and sometimes he bent the rules. Now, he would never bend the rules in the first 2 seasons, or he'd find a loophole, but man, he got like serious business in seasons 3.
There is a speech he gives near the end of season. That is probably the best thing he
Yeah.
did. And if you go back and read writings about that, he had just found out the show was canceled. There'd be no season 5. He gets up there and gives that performance after gestating season 5. Whatever you want to say, give the man credit.
Paramount said that the fans online got really heated, and they said, what would it take? And they said it will take about $100,000
Per episode?
Yeah, I think it was just to get it lit.
Okay. For another.
And the fans got it, and they still said, well, no. Yeah. Oh yeah. The Paramount truly misrepresented themselves as a caretaker. I am not. Don't give. If you're gonna have something for 4 seasons, write it until it's gone. Take the loss. There's so many companies willing to take the loss to put their ethos on something and take a loss for it, and you're going to do that for like your agendas or political leanings. Do it for the fans. Give fans what they want, or at least if you say we're going to cancel this next year, write a season.
Right.
Write a season that makes sense, and let it taper off. Don't just hard cut it. Look what happened to Jericho. It's one of the best shows ever made.
Yes.
And they probably, I don't know if that show works in today, and I don't even care about like tone.
I don't know if it does.
I think that those actors just nailed it. The sister, the brother, the two brothers,
Yes.
like that.
That dynamic.
The mom and dad,
Yep.
the actual actors that
Mhm.
played the mom and dad. That was a slice of life of the earth that does not exist anymore.
At that moment.
At that moment, they were the perfect cast.
Right.
I'm not sure if and the tax lady, like Mimi, is her name Mimi? I think her name's Mimi. Yeah. I think she personified like that naivety of Washington to the rural people, and I thought they really brought that home, and the fact that they found commonality and love and love story in that.
In the middle of all of this.
In the middle of all this, yeah, And the guy who plays on The Walking Dead.
Lenny James.
Yeah, he's man. I tell you what, everything he's been in that I've watched, he nails it. And I love his erratic, or yeah, his erratic kind of like anxiety that he brings to like when he's speaking, and because it's like, man, I really believe this guy. Like there's something up.
For a British dude to have a pretty good nondescript, sort of Southern, but not really. But
What's the guy? He's from Scream. The Judd, or what's his name? The main guy of.
David Arquette.
No, of the young brother, the guy who's pretty much the star.
Oh! I can see his face.
Isn't it Judd?
Something like that.
Judd. Yeah, that he's the guy from Scream.
Okay.
Yeah, that guy, and like that was his like stardom in that show, and they just killed him.
What did you get? 6, 7 episodes, and that was really just to close up the story as best they could.
Yeah.
I think.
But yeah, so I know we went from the Enterprise to there, but yeah, there's some things. Don't start a series unless you're gonna at least give enough time for it.
And I don't think in our world of streaming that is anyone's idea. You see, Netflix, after about 2 seasons, it'll knock something out, whether it's a hit or not.
Well, they did that on that one Power show where they're all gods. They're from another planet.
Right.
Yeah, Skeet Ulrich. Skeet Ulrich, man, he nails that.
It was really good.
I loved it. I still watch it from that. Like every now and then, I'll just watch it all right through. It's closest to a Fallout show we're gonna get, a Fallout video game that we're ever gonna get.
Fallout
it's like,
Vegas, or
yeah, well, it's like a prequel. So this show's like a prequel to Fallout.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of shows that nobody wants to watch, or at least they should be watching. A lot of trash that keeps on getting views, I guess.
Yes, there's half the stuff comes on Netflix. I don't even know it's on there.
Yeah. Oh, so Netflix did a superheroes show. I believe it was Netflix, where they're like, it was a comic, I believe, and it's the father is that's the animated comic. Amazon. So there's a group of heroes, and there's a prison where there's just a bunch of bad heroes, and then there's some rogue superhero that's or villain that's trying to usurp everything. It was a great season on, I believe it was Netflix, it may not be, but they would cut it off after the first season, and they said, well, I think it was politically driven, like there was too many of the wrong demographic that liked it, and they just pulled it, and they said, we're going to retune this. Like, what? Like, you guys are great. And it may have been Amazon, but I think it was Netflix. But it was a great show. I really liked it, and they advertise it every now and then.
One of the things I think is interesting about Netflix is when Stranger Things came out, and it's been a massive success in season 4 by all measures and metrics.
I stopped watching it halfway through.
It's fine, but one of the things I think is interesting is they didn't drive subscribers. Or you sign up for 1 month just to binge it, and you're done.
Yeah.
So that model is not.
I canceled Netflix with only watching it.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. Disney Plus is trying to do content, which I get if you want to compete with.
Well, they're about to get an ad.
Yeah, because you have that and Hulu and all those different things. So that's going to be interesting. I would not be a good host if I didn't ask you one more question about Enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Paul? Yes,
Nope.
She's the
Nope.
best Vulcan.
I'm pretty sure I knew you would say something similar to that.
And I like the engineer. He was my favorite.
All right, so I'm going to ask you the hard one. What ended up being the series finale? The one with Commander Riker.
Oh, yeah.
Counselor Ford. What's your take on that episode?
That type of pretentious hack storytelling doesn't really go into. So I have a headcanon.
Okay.
I know it exists. I know it's a thing. I know it's something that they could have done. It doesn't really bother me, nor does it. To me, it was a nothing episode. Like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. But you know what? You can't fool me because that's not what you're doing.
If there had been a season 5, do you think the fan base would have had a bigger problem? If that was your season finale?
Did fans have a problem with it?
The majority of the fans, at least from who I interacted with, did not like it. They felt it was an insult to the Enterprise actors and actresses by basically making it a holodeck simulation that really was advancing the storyline in the TNG universe rather than really closing up.
But does that really stop it from being canon? Because it's still canon.
No, I don't think so. I think
I mean, why
Some
do they
people
have
were-
I guess if you have a gripe, it would be that they didn't have the original cast send off.
mhm.
But I mean, you could say that they did, and because they were there inside the holodeck, it doesn't bother me. But I think that was hack writing. I think that there's a lot of hack writers out there that think that they know how to do stuff, and sometimes they hit hits and sometimes they have misses. Thankfully for them that they've had enough hits to keep us going. But I think that when they get pressed to the table, the hack comes out.
Right.
I think that was hack. I don't know who did it. It doesn't really affect me.
Nobody here is raising their hand who won't admit to having written for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't bother me. Like, it doesn't affect my headcanon. The experiences I had so I first watched the first couple episodes at a friend's house, actually. We had a big group from church, and we all sat around the TV, and we all watched it, and, with Star Trek fans. So it was an event for us, and nothing's going to ever take that. And, I would go on to watch a lot of these episodes over and over. There was a time that I had not insomnia, but I needed something to fall asleep to. So I would always put on, like the Angry Video Game Nerd or something, or I would put on Futurama. And there was a time where Futurama, probably for over a year, every episode got played over and over and over and over and over and over. When I would fall asleep to it. Prior to Futurama, I believe it was Enterprise. I had the Enterprise episodes ripped off of the TV tuner that I got, and I copied the episodes, and I just watched it over. And then, of course, when Netflix had it, I watched it over and over and over and over.
Right.
Do sleeping. So it's always been, I've used that as a background, and I would just say it's usually season 3 and 4.
Okay, so that was the Zindi War. Right?
Yeah, the Zindi Wars is my favorite arc. The episode where they find the Vulcan ship in the Zindi area, and they've gone all Stargraven mad. That is one of my favorite episodes. It's got a little horror to it. It's got aliens kind of thing where they're in the infrastructure of the ship trying to get from point A to point B. I was like, you know what? There's a little hack writing coming out of there because they're stealing from other IPs, but if you're going to steal from the best, I guess.
I mean, you can make the argument there is no original idea in Hollywood anyway
No,
at
there
this
isn't
point.
really. Yeah, so I really like those. They have some really big science fiction episodes, like the one where there's the 2 aliens that are trying to make a kid, but they need a third.
Mhm.
That was simulacrum or whatever it was called. That was a very it made you think. It stretched your what would humans do if given this situation? That's true sci-fi. Just being on a spaceship isn't science fiction. Yeah, I mean it's kind of like resting on your laurels, science fiction. Okay, you're in space. Gotcha. Vacuum outside. Gotcha. Okay, what are you doing? And that's where Star Trek really picks up the sci-fi, because Star Trek has always said, hey, let me take this somewhat taboo idea or socially, what would be socially irresponsible if you just had a conversation with somebody. Let's put this into a setting that is approachable. And Star Trek is that show. That's what it means to me. I don't go there for. I would go to Deep Space Nine, not just for that, but they had some really good space battles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm telling you, man, that the Dominion Wars really was good stuff. Really, really good stuff. So that's where I was. I was there for both because you got both, and you got some ground battles with
Sure.
Worf and the Dominion. They had some ground battles, and especially when the Klingons got involved, and you'd see the Klingon bird of prey in battle. So there's a lot of good stuff there, but I do believe that the other episodes. My uncle's watching Voyager, so I've picked up some Voyager. I actually watched the Voyager episode I've never seen before, but always was my Pegasus was the one where there's a ball of water in space,
Yes.
and we don't know where that water came from. Uh, and we kind of learn over time that it's been put there by another species, but these people are basically ruining it, and that's where Lieutenant Paris, or should we say the guy who was the saxophone player and Master of the Universe,
Or he was.
Courtney Cox's boyfriend.
That is correct. He was also the leader of Red Squad in Star Trek: Next Generation.
Yes, he
Mr.
was.
Locarno,
Yes.
who was expelled. Continue on.
Yes. One of my favorite actors, no-name actors at least. Not many people know him, but it's kind of like that guy from the Orville. The short one, the friend.
Yes.
He played in Critters. He's the boy in Critters, and I love Critters. It's one of my favorite movies. So you have a lot of stuff going in Star Trek. A lot of good actors. They have a lot of good scenarios. I will say my favorite episode of Voyager is the dinosaurs.
Okay.
Well, okay, the Borg stuff is pretty good.
Pretty
Especially the fluid space.
Mhm.
That's an interesting concept that I thought was good. I actually thought so. To get this back to where the future of Star Trek is, there's two things that I thought they always missed. Is that before Avery Brooks gets out of acting range, you need to bring him back as the emissary.
He's still resting.
Uh-huh.
He's still resting for 30-something years.
And I think he needs to come back to fight the dinosaurs, who now they know they've had a political shakeup. They've had their religion, cast out for facts that they came from Earth, and now they want it back. You don't need to go into the Orion Syndicate, although that's nice. You don't need to go there. You have a legitimate threat to Earth itself that could possibly make war with the entirety of the Federation, not be Borg to where they have to use some Deus Ex Machina to finally win, or to have some thing that Janeway brought back, some idea or Seven of Nine idea to beat the Borg, or to pull it from Picard, which we won't talk about. Once I move on.
I understand.
So the dinosaurs need to come back. Because you remember when I said they haven't moved past in the future? They have, but it was Picard.
It's okay. I know what you meant. I was just
thought it
going to
was
let that
stupid.
lay right there.
Yeah, I don't like Picard. I think it was stupid.
So
There's some things in it that I like, but most things.
So two things that you said that really intrigued me. Number one is you said how Star Trek's always dealt with issues in a way that were approachable, not conversations we can have, especially on the day that Michelle Nichols passes away. They really, in a lot of ways, and I would put them there with Twilight Zone in the 60s. Now, before our time, but through the power of reruns, we come along.
Yeah.
The
Outer Limits.
the impact of seeing someone of color on as a bridge officer, not an extra, an actual officer. So in other words, if everyone on the bridge is or if all the ranking officers are incapacitated, she's next up. She can take command of the ship. And we've often heard the Martin Luther King Jr. story. Whether it's true or not, it makes a great story no matter what. That she wanted to leave the series. It's like, no, you need to be on there.
Oh,
Because children need to be able to see.
yeah.
And you're talking about, and that's the reason I want to talk about that is because you're talking about the future. TOS, the original series, went out of its way. Now, season 3, I'm just going to grade on a curve because, well, it just is what it is. Spock's brain. That's all I got to say about that. But for the most part, the series is based on hope for the future of humanity. When you get into TNG, it's, oh, well, money and things aren't important anymore. Because in Roddenberry's mind, that was how you solve conflicts and problems, is take that reasoning away and everything will be fine. That's one of the reasons why he fought so hard on some of the stories that eventually he let the reins loose. For example, the first 3 seasons, they were told no arguing amongst the officers because there wouldn't be arguing in the future. Now, we can sit here and go, I don't know. That was his vision of the future, and as he kind of loosened the reins a little, we saw changes. And then, I'll tell you now, Deep Space Nine would not have been made if he had had
Nope.
full say-so. Even Voyager, I'm not convinced.
I mean, they brought his wife in to kind of smooth things over for.
They did, but I think he would have just kiboshed it, if at all possible. And so it has always been hopeful for the future.
Is
Which
the Kobayashi Maru of Star Trek?
I want to be Dr. McCoy, just lay on the ground with him dead and just give a wonderful performance. They differ themselves from Star Wars. I think some of the ideas were to tell, not more have more intelligent storytelling, but higher concepts that speak to exactly where we are now, and a hopeful future. And I agree with you. I like my Star Trek with that. Not, well, you know what? It's just one thing after another.
They're doing it in Strange New World. They're doing it right off the bat, and I'm just like, oh. And by the time you get to the end, let me just say, they have a single thought in this show, and it is a thought that is actually congruent with Star Trek lore set out in several different in the movies, the Wrath of Khan, and you get it with the Data and Lore arcs. There's a couple hologram episodes of Voyager that have talked about our holograph sentient beings when they have enough data processing, giving them a mentor. What constitutes a person? When do you give people rights? And that kind of brings true, like, what if we birthed AI that became self? When you get into quantum mechanics and quantum computing, one of the things about quantum computing is it's supposed to be able to program itself and solve, be able to look at a problem and come up with the solution by solving itself and new ideas. And at that point, you start to see that things can probably be. It gets the, what do they call it? The uncanny valley. The gap starts to get smaller. So, and then when you get this show and the topic that they're choosing to grab onto, and several things, the Doctor has a very interesting story on this. I really appreciated it, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't even want to say if it ends too much, but the Doctor has a great story arc. He has a great story. I love listening to him. And the characters that you think are going to be annoying because of just the history of checkboxes are no, they're all likable, at least to me. And I get pretty annoyed with some of these, like, we're just going to bring people in that aren't really fitting in this universe.
Right.
Or to put somebody from our universe, somebody who you could find on Twitter or Facebook or at a bar, and then bring them into the universe of Star Trek does not make sense. And I thought they probably did that too much, especially with that cartoon. But
Lower Decks.
Lower Decks. People don't talk like that in the future. People don't talk like that now unless they're crazy. So I think that there's a lot of, like, they want to break our immersion. And what I really like about this series that tries to create Star Trek pure, original, and I don't mean the next generation Star Trek. I'm not Discovery Star Trek, not Enterprise Star Trek, not Voyager Star Trek, or even Deep Space Nine Star Trek. It's trying to recreate the original Star Trek, and that's where I'm intrigued the most, because I saw that through reruns.
Right.
I saw that in parallel to watching The Next Generation. When you are a child or teen and comparing these things together, there's no comparison. Sure. Next Generation wins all day day long. You have to, you have to grow accustomed to, you know, to somebody who watched it in the '60s. Uhura is not, it's something completely different than me, because I saw, women and women of color in, multiple movies by that age.
By that time, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I'm glad you
So,
brought that up.
so it's not, her, knocking down doors isn't for me in my Star Trek. So I don't get that when I watch it in 1990. So, when I started getting home and they were pushing those after, they took away G.I. Joe and Transformers, I had to watch Star Trek before my mom got home and started watching Oprah. That was the last year. So I actually did watch the original series through reruns when I got home from school. So, and then I would watch, and that was every day. Then I watched one episode of The Next Generation.
Right.
But Uhura, she was the lady who did the dance in episode 5. Was it Final Frontier?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, with Spock's brother. She does the distracting dance. I was just like, oh, yeah, that's her. And she's in the movies. She's in the movies. She's like a taskmaster in a search for, or a voyage home. Yeah, she's like keeping everybody on the ball. So when I see it, this is just par for the course for me, seeing her. But in the '60s, that's something totally different. And the people who lived through that had the conversations, that's why television shows are so important. But they're very organic. They're not sitting there going, hey, there's a societal problem, let me just like wave it in your face and that.
Right.
They're like, no, we're gonna give you a good show. And if this offends you and you need to think about why you're offended. Because if you like the show, that offends you, maybe it's you. And so, that's what I ask myself when I watch something that I find, that offends me. I was like, hey, did it really offend me? What did it do?
Right.
And chances are it just broke my emotions. And I'm just like, okay, this is. And sometimes they break it through bad graphics, like Marvel or whatever it is. But in Star Trek, expect people to look. Expect people to have there to be aliens. One of the best characters in this Strange New Worlds, dude. One of the things about this show, they take a book, and they stole this directly from Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon will kill a character in a heartbeat.
Right.
No fear. Like, oh, you like that character? Yeah, I like that character too. Oh, you like that actor? I love that actor too. Gone, dead. Done. Let's see what we get. Star Trek does it. They do. I was like, you guys have guts. Boldly go where no man has gone before. They do it. They absolutely do it in the show, and I'm just like kind of taken aback, like, man, props for it. Because I really like that. They're just like, and the way they told it, the story was really good. Like, good storytelling, good scenery, graphics, like their special effects were good. This show was quality. I really, coming from Discovery, because I saw a couple episodes of the last season of Discovery. Don was watching it, and my uncle. And I was like, this is like, what is the word? Hiring? Like, this is too taxing.
Mm-hmm.
This is too.
And when you get to that point or something, it's time to move on. I have one more topic for you, and then we'll do a little rapid fire. Last night, the Nature Boy Ric Flair came out of retirement.
Did he?
Well, no, technically he had done that once before on an Australian tour against Hulk Hogan in 2013 maybe, because he lost to Shawn Michaels in WrestleMania Orlando. A couple of months later, he's wrestling on Australian tour, so bleeding all over the place. Well, last night, he decided to have his final match until the next one. 73 years old. It was he and his son-in-law, Andrade, against Jay Lethal, who's a young guy from Ring of Honor, who was working with, actually training him to get him back into sort of ring shape at 73. And Double J, that's Jeff, Jarre, Double T, Jeff Jarrett. And yes, I had to do that. And of course, Flair goes over. Now, what you don't know is Broken Ansible is a lifelong wrestling fan, such as I. And Flair wins, pins Jarrett with figure four. We'll ignore the fact that Flair's shoulders were on the mat too at the same time. The referee did, so I guess we'll ignore it as well. Technically, well, it depends on what the referee from a certain point of view.
Yes.
So, because that just happened, you had The Undertaker, Bret Hart, Mick Foley at ringside for his last match. And I didn't order the pay-per-view because I don't want to see a 73-year-old in the ring because that makes me nervous. And then he gigged, which means he bled. I don't need to see a 73-year-old man bleed. But these are my opinions only. Do you have a particular Ric Flair thing that sticks out at you? 'Cause a lot of people have been doing their Ric Flair memories over the last couple of days. Do you have one as a wrestling fan that jumps out at you? Or a story or something? Or a Ric Flairism that you use in life to mess with people that they may or may not understand what you're talking about?
Look, to be the man, you got to be the man. So, I'm a begrudging lifelong. I did not like him when I watched wrestling because I was caught up in the drama as a kid. I was actually a big Sting fan and Ultimate Warrior fan and a Legion of Doom fan. I like the Steiner Brothers. So Ric Flair was like a generic wrestler, in my opinion, back in the as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, as a kid, because he didn't have any finish.
Right.
When he came out, with the feathers, the studs, the rings, the sunglasses inside of the auditorium, and so he came out like this, like it was pageantry, and then he just had a mankini.
Pretty much.
And he didn't have a great body, he's not like, we kind of, watched the shows for like, they're like those little muscle characters.
Mm-hmm.
So they were
yeah.
the personification of cartoon characters.
Sure.
And he was just kind of like, eh. But then he'd eye rake you, or he'd okie doke you between the legs, or he'd shake his hands and then gouge you in your eye.
We've all been there.
And so he was kind of an enigma. And then we were going to South Carolina to visit my uncle who lived there at the time, and I stopped at a Flash Flood gas station, and we wouldn't leave. That was an 8-hour drive, and we wouldn't leave until my mom got home from work at like 4:30. We'd go the long way down Highway 301, all the way through those Georgia, little podunk towns that'll pull you over if you're doing one long way limit. We would stop in Jessup, Georgia, and Statesboro, South Carolina. We would get to the end of Georgia, and there would be this one place we always stopped at around 11 o'clock at night to get hot dogs, 2 for $1,
There you go.
or whatever, and then a tall, drink. And they would give you, and I think I've showed you these, the cups with, I have a 4 Horsemen, I have Barry Windham, I have Ric Flair, I think I have Sting, or not, I think I have a Road Warrior. But that's when I kind of was like, okay, I got to get into this because I got the cups. I'm a fan.
Right.
I need to see more. And then you didn't see Barry Windham as often because after he hurt himself, he would come in drinking a beer, or like he didn't give no cares in the world. He's just like, I'm going to beat you. And then you would see like all the cheating that would happen. And that was their stick. And then you'd listen to all their trash talking, like,
All right.
I like this horse doggery going on. So I got into being a Ric Flair fan, and especially when there was the invasion.
Right.
That the NWO came out, and one of the things that and Ric Flair had gone to WWF, comeback and all that.
Sure.
And the Ric Flair, I actually thought did better for a good time. When he was on Saturdays, or Barry Windham would be on Saturdays, and he would be at the side of the ring,
Right.
going for an Intercontinental Champion or something like that. But I think he wrestled better in or at least the wrestling was overproduced in
Sure.
WWF at that time. It had a different camera look and feel. Everything was kind of like lighter and cheaper feeling when you watched WCW in the very beginning.
Because it was.
It was, right? It was it was Florida Championship Wrestling, then NWA Wrestling, and then it was WCW.
Well, even the rings were smaller
Yeah,
in the NWA than they were.
yeah. So but when Flair came back, and Four Horsemen kind of held the WCW while the NWO was trying to take over, man. And Ric Flair had a very big role in it before Stinky. I mean, he was placeholder for Sting, man. I love that guy. I know he's got his problems, and I still think you need to watch The Wrestler. That's one of the best movies ever made.
Well, the running joke was they aired it on pay-per-view last night. But I will not make that joke. But I have known folk today who have made that joke. So I'm just going to leave that alone because I didn't watch the movie. So I don't know if that's an accurate portrayal or not. So.
Yeah, I think Mickey Rourke does a really fantastic job selling, going through. I mean, I cried in that. I mean, it is. These men are putting their bodies on the line. The men and the women, especially that come back today, they're overtrained. They have more technology to help pad the sprains that you can get. There's nobody asking for blood to spray anywhere. We're over ECW. The ladies are actually turning out to be better wrestlers than the guys. Half the time, they're way more likable. I mean, like Bailey, geez, like one of the best wrestler concepts I've had. She's just like, I just want to give her a hug.
Now, Broken Ansible's a little bit behind. She turned heel,
Look, man,
but never in his heart as he
Never.
got to meet her
Ric
in
Flair,
NXT show.
That's just the Ric Flair.
Right.
It's she must have grown up as a Ric Flair fan. You can be a heel and still be the champion.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's what Ric Flair brought. Like, you can hate me all you want, but you win
That's it.
all the time.
That's true.
So I don't mind the heels. I do think that when I did try and go back to watch some wrestling within the last year, I think that some of the WWE heels, they're just insufferable. Like, I don't like half the groups. I thought they were weird. Like, and that's coming from a wrestling fan. Like,
And a science fiction
we had
fan.
the Steamboats.
Well, that's true.
We had the crazy. We had the Junkyard Dog. Man, we had what was the guys who would go around? There was two, the Bayou Brothers or something like that. Do you remember the two Bayou guys? They would come out in like camo.
The Bushwhackers?
The Bushwhackers, yeah.
You ain't looking at me, man. I'm just going to tell you right now. There's no head licking going on that might have been happening with the Bushwhackers.
Look, man, I've seen some crazy
Mhm.
with the Bushwhackers. That's crazy television. They're just throwing things on the wall, seeing what sticks. But when I turned on the WWE in 2020 or 2021, and I saw some of the heels, I was just like I don't like any of this. Like, okay, I get the stars, but you heels are stupid.
Well, you said it earlier. No one talks that way, and I think that's one of the challenges in wrestling is they script, Elizabethan English. I'm like, no one talks that way. One of my big pet peeves, maybe we'll do a wrestling show one day, is they'll say, all right, tonight, right here in this very ring. And I'm like, literally no one talks that way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the 80s, trying to...
Maybe, but my
and
hair
maybe
would
in
be a
New
lot
York.
bigger.
Maybe in New York
Maybe.
or Jersey, or maybe... Look, Booker T. Washington, the Nasty Boys... Well, I guess Booker T. and his brother,
Yeah, Stevie Ray.
Yeah, Stevie-
Harlem Heat.
The Harlem Heat, the Nasty Boys, literally the Four Horsemen, or the Three Horsemen, as they
Oh,
were
yeah, that's
for
true.
a good while. Especially when Benoit was there. You had, and then NWO, and then the Wolfpack. how can you ever top those? And maybe that's their problem. How can you top as heels? The Nasty Boys are still, I've seen YouTube videos of them selling their wares. I mean,
Oh yeah.
dude, they're cutting up. They're cutting up at the, insulting people next to them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, these dudes they live it.
Living the gimmick.
I mean, they live the gimmick, and I know they're having fun too. But,
Sure.
But they're probably, meet me out back. I'll give you, punch you. We'll go fisticuffs.
Right.
And pay me $5 for my autograph.
Seems fair.
Yeah, it's probably overcost.
Probably.
No, I like that. I think the Nasty Boys were great. But when I look, that's what a heel is. And then you get Kane from WWE. I didn't get too into that rivalry. I thought that was a little silly. But then Triple H was he was a baddie. And then there was the Raven.
Yep.
Yeah,
Raven and his flock.
That was an interesting wrestling take. They definitely were like, hey, look, we're people from Seattle and we wrestled.
Both the Raven. Never mind.
They had a stick that was really intriguing. I haven't seen that in modern day wrestling. I think the last good wrestling I watched is when we watched Ring of Honor.
Hmm?
That one thing at like 5 in the morning, man, it was like.
Oh yeah. That was one from Japan. That
Yep.
was Wrestle Kingdom, which
Yep.
was their yearly deal. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we actually ordered the pay-per-view in 2 different states and watched it together. Yeah, that's true.
I would say that was one of my favorite modern wrestling because those people know what it's all about. You put on a show. I don't, and this is possibly because I don't watch the television show, or I don't watch wrestling anymore. I have television, but I don't live with the cable service,
Sure.
so at my fingertips. It's in this state, not the state I technically live in. So I don't get to watch the weekly show on television. And my uncle would just scroll through.
Right.
And I've wanted to, kind of sit there and watch the new stuff to see if I just missed the wrong moment.
Right.
And eventually I might get back to it, but I don't know if WWE is that. Alice, maybe it will be now since the problem is
Right.
gone.
Right.
Because I think he was the biggest problem with the stories. Like he was living a super fantasy. I think that he bought up all of his competitors and then tanked the genre.
Say what you want about WCW Nitro and them still having scripts not finished 5 minutes before. Same jokes can be made about WWE being rewritten 6 times on a Monday afternoon for a 9 o'clock show. Well, 8 o'clock show.
I'm not. I was never disappointed with WCW Nitro. I was never disappointed. So if you told me today that all the shenanigan that was going on backstage, how they were so inept at their accounting, how they were inept at their show running, I, as the fan, would have never have known it because it was so enjoyable.
Right.
And I would say maybe that was actually what made it what it was.
Possibly. I mean,
You know-
pull down that tapestry, dare I say, a Star Trek episode.
Yeah.
See what changed.
Because if you have to lean on your talent, let your talent be leaned on. They're getting paid.
Sure.
As long as Ric Flair is the living legend of being able to pull a crowd. And I bet you some of that stuff he was shooting.
Oh, no doubt.
And, I mean, he was getting into real life. He was starting to say stuff about what was about to happen in real life. And it was just like, dang, he ain't playing around. He ain't pulling punches. This man may be your ex-wife's new husband and ex-husband. And
It might have happened, too.
it probably did, and that's the crazy stuff that, obviously that is not something that I would support, but that type of like creativity on the fly, able to think on his feet, he was a businessman. That was his brand,
Right.
and I think that some of these showrunners are trying to make the brand for the wrestlers, and not letting the wrestlers sell you their brand. If people are sitting there, what was that guy, Samoa Joe?
Yep.
So didn't we see him in person?
We did, yeah.
So Samoa Joe was just a clean wrestler. The guy, I wanted to watch more of him. And I know he had gotten hurt, and then he was on a comeback and all that. Samoa Joe, I think, I'm not thinking WCW, I'm not thinking WWE, I'm thinking Samoa Joe. I didn't care if Sting or the Ultimate Warrior was in WWE and Sting was in WCW. I wanted them to fight, but you know what? If they never fight, but there's enough people around to fight, and so I would just watch the wrestlers for the wrestlers. I wasn't watching it for the frame, the tapestry, so to speak. If we'll keep that metaphor. I watched the Steiner brothers to watch them do their high flying action. Rey Mysterio, I watched him. I didn't care that he was in one or the other. Those were inconveniences. That he wasn't in this so he could fight these people that may have been really good to fight. So when we saw those people at NXT, and you see Bailey, and you see what's that guy? It's got the green, red, white, and blue, black, blue.
Apollo Crews?
Apollo Crews. Never saw him before. We saw him at NXT, and then I'm like, oh, this dude's legit. This guy, he's just a fun person to watch.
Right.
And that's that type of personality. He brought in, one of the things about his brand is he's bringing gamers over. He's pulling, he's tugging at a string that I'm just like, hey, okay, but I don't like the WWE right now. And I don't want to have to get, the one thing I thought about the WWE network is that they always advertised a Wednesday NXT, but I can never catch it.
Right.
I was like, why do I even have this? To watch SummerSlam, to watch, the beach, one of the beach episodes from back in the day. Back at the beach. If this is all I'm watching, I watched those back in the day. So do I really want to watch this right now with 1,000 other things to watch? Or give me the NXT. Why can't I get this video on demand?
Right.
So I can actually tap into these brands. But the WWE, I don't think wanted that to happen. I think they wanted to hide all this stuff, make you go see it because they're putting on the Full Sail piece, and they wanted a live studio audience, and they wanted to push you down Vince's little machination of storytelling that's way outdated. So when I saw Apollo Crews, I was like, oh, this is a guy that's actually kind of tugging me, wanting to come back, and he's not doing it because he's a wrestler. He's doing it because he's kind of a gamer, and he's like, that's relevant to what I do right now. So okay, well, let me see if I can go find it. Samoa Joe just reminded me of that kind of clean talent back in the day. Bailey was just, hey, there's these wrestling girls that aren't like these supermodels, and
Right.
That are people that look like they're about to get broken arms and wrists and legs, and are way underdressed for being in that ring. And some of their stories weren't great, and I'm not a big diva fan, but the wrestlers that were coming out of the female wrestlers coming out of NXT were amazing. You have that one girl that was in Mandalorian.
Yeah, Sasha Banks.
Yeah, Sasha Banks, good. She's awesome. Yeah, and obviously she's even more talented than her wrestling.
And I'm hoping she gets to be in the next Mandalorian season. I assume she will.
I hope so.
More than likely.
I hope so. That's the type of character you can write about. I think that they could do good things with the Mandalorians. Sasha Banks definitely looked like she had a chip on her shoulder, and that's exactly how they're kind of portrayed in Clone Wars, at least for the best one.
Right.
Or what is it? Death Watch. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of talent that they kind of hid, and hopefully they'll bring it out and maybe shuffle things back, and let the character, or let the people bring their brand, instead of trying to, brand them,
Right.
like cattle. I never got that. Vince was kind of crazy, and I fell apart from wrestling when WCW was bought.
And a lot of people did or they stuck around for the invasion that lasted like a month. And they're like, we're good. You won the war, so all of our guys are going to get beat. Okay,
Yeah, and bring The Rock back. Give him $50 million.
yeah, he's worth it. Well, he needs it after.
He should be president.
Well, he needs it after Super Pets movie underwhelmed significantly at the box office. So I hear. So I hear. It was not a good showing. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to do some rapid fire for you. Just give me the first thing that comes to your mind, and I ask you a series of questions. Best Zelda video game ever?
Link to the Past.
That's nice. If I were to ride in your car and you were to have a CD or something streaming, some music in your vehicle, what would be the first song that come on?
King for a day.
All right. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Vanilla.
Does pineapple belong on a pizza?
Yes.
Why?
Does it taste good?
Fair enough. Does it have to have ham on it too, or just pineapple by itself?
It could be with anything that I would eat. Like I could put jalapenos, banana peppers, pepperoni.
In addition to the pineapple?
That is a normal pizza that I would purchase.
All right. More likely to buy a drink from Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Dunkin'.
What's your go-to at Dunkin'?
The large X iced coffee right now is the butter pecan,
Okay.
but normally it would be caramel if they have that, or no chocolate.
How do you roll when it comes fall? Do you go pumpkin crazy?
No.
Do you run away from it just because?
No.
You just all like the flavor.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're still on the Dunkin' Donuts. I thought
Yeah.
you were. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Pumpkin spice. Yeah, for
All
sure.
right.
I thought you were actually physical pumpkins, like
No.
like
we're
putting
not,
them on my stoop or anything
yeah,
like that.
No, we're not jack-o'-lantern or anything like that.
No. Yeah, I do the pumpkin spice.
Do you?
Ice cream. Absolutely.
Pie or cake?
Cake.
What kind?
Strawberry on strawberry cream cheese.
It's decadent, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean like strawberry like in the vanilla. I mean like pink. Like the cake has to be pink
Right.
with a lot of strawberry flavor, and then it needs strawberry cream cheese icing.
All right, just a couple more. We'll let you go. The Star Wars Holiday Special.
Never watched it. Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. Anything on your radar from Marvel or DC coming out? Is there anything you're looking forward to potentially?
Nothing. I mean, do they even have stuff coming out?
They might have announced one or 10 things.
No Wolverine. No Deadpool.
We're getting to it. Yeah, they did announce Deadpool. Except they're not calling it Deadpool. Where are you in The Walking Dead? I haven't asked you that in a while.
Man, I am at the same place in the original series. I got up to 8.
Okay.
Halfway through 8. They've gone to the kingdom. And
So they're still doing all-out war? Still?
They were just starting it. I've never progressed past it. And then I went back and I restarted it, and I got to season 4, 5, and then stopped watching it for a couple months. Came back here and we started watching it from season 1 again.
That would be Lady Cephas' fault. He's into that.
No, this was Don, my uncle. We was like, hey, because he's got the memory of both of us. He actually says that about himself. He does not. If you talk to him about a show that he watched a week ago, like a Star Wars show, he won't remember anything that happened. It's a blessing and a curse. It means he'll never get bored. He'll always have something to watch.
Right.
But you can't hold conversation. So even if he's seen The Walking Dead a dozen times, he could start over, and he's good to go. So we're actually watching Doctor Who, the original. Not the classics. We're watching the 2006, 2008, starting from season 1. We're about to see.
All right, last question for you, and this is going to be a metaphysical question, sort of esoteric, because we've seen it play out in science fiction and fantasy. if you knew a child were to grow up with a terrible dictator or despot, responsible for the loss of life, however many, what'd you do with the child? You let them grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea that you would, you hold a future you accountable or future them accountable for something they haven't done yet, it's preposterous. Yeah, I would say if you have that godlike power, why did you let them
Turn the tables on me, I like it. All right, well, that's all that I had for you this evening. Thank you for joining us, Broken Ansible. He'll be back. Don't look at the smile on his face. He'll be back for sure.
It was fun.
It was fun. We appreciate it. We'll get this uploaded here in just a little bit. Thank you for all your support. You can comment, like. It helps us in the YouTube algorithm quite a bit. Everyone have a great evening. We will see you again later this week with our Midnight Magic Musings. The mothership, our premiership, will be on a little bit later. Take care, everyone.